All right, good evening and welcome to Wings and Beer Nights of the Hanukkah edition of Daf Yomi. And we are sponsored for the week by Rabbi and Evelyn Gislasi, Bizchus a Refuah Shlema for Rabbi mother, Gracia Bat Misoda. And then we also are, our wings are sponsored by somebody, right? It's anonymous at this point, but we're waiting for that donor to check in. So if you are that anonymous donor and you don't know it yet, we appreciate you and thank you for joining. Okay.
We need a donor?
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do it.
All right. Very good.
Moshe.
You should come forward with boxes now.
I'm saying.
You're right.
All I know is I'm good.
Beer,
Right? I'm very good.
All right. Schreiber, Moshe.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Beautiful.
In honor of the wings.
In honor of my wife.
In honor of his wife. Very good. That is a good reason.
Like that.
As long as you make your wife happy.
That's it.
Okay.
Iboilahu. So now let's ask a question. Tadir v'she'eno tadir, right? So now we know that tadir and she'eno tadir is first. Okay, the one that's more common is first. V'kodem v'shachat l'she'eno tadir, but you messed up, and you did the not right one first. Okay, so now what? What do you do now? Mi amrin on kaven deshach. I have a sore throat, so I'm going to use my tie a little bit if everybody. It's okay. So I did. Mi amrin on kaven deshachte makriv le. Do we say, well, you've already started the other one, now you got to finish it. O dilma yohiv la'acher demaris bedamo, or do you hand the blood over to somebody else, tell them to stir it for a while? You've got to tell your korban to take care of. Ad demakriv lila tadir v'hadir makriv l'sheino tadir. You got to go finish your tadir first and then come back, right? So that's the question. Do you interrupt? You messed up. So now do you go back and you interrupt, or you just finish up? Amar Rav Huna misura. So Rav Huna from Surah says Toshma. Shlomim shel emesh, this is our old case, right? We had Shlomim came to the Azar yesterday, and now it's still sitting here, not shechted yet. Chatos ve'osham shel yom, and we've got the chatos and the osham from today. Shel emesh kodim l'shel yom. Yesterday's comes first. Ha d'yom dumya de'emesh. So that means that if the Shlomim came today, right, which would be the same time as, right, in the circumstance that it would be the same rule as if it came yesterday. So what is that? 1 second, I'm messing that up. Oh, I see what he's saying. He's saying that the case circumstance would be, right, if you had today's korban, which would be in the same circumstance as yesterday's korban. So now we take a comma for a second, say, hey, Chidami, what are we talking about there? Dekodem shachti l'shlamim. That what happened is, you've done it, right? It's now sitting here and it's done. You've shachted it. So we said if it's yesterday, we said if it's yesterday's korban, do we take care of it first? That would mean that if I've got today's and it's in the same category, meaning I have shechted it now, just like I shechted yesterday's. I shechted this one first. Chatas ve'osham kadmi. It still tells us the chatas and the osham come first, which tells me that even though I started the wrong one. I did today's korban first, which was not the right thing to do. Today's shlamim first. Nevertheless, it seems that I have to interrupt, and I have to do my chatas and my osham and go back. Okay. So the Gemara says no, maybe not. Maybe dilma shlomim de'emesh v'chatas ve'osham de'yom. So what we mean is, maybe what we're saying, we're talking about the shlomim is from yesterday, and the chatas and the osham are from today. Heichi mishkachas le. How do you have that? How do you have the shlomim from yesterday? So that's, for example, deshachtinu litarvayu. You shachted both of these korbanos. So now you've got the shachted shlamim and you've got the shachted chatos. They're both here, sitting here. And now the question is, which one do we go first? So we're going to do the shlamim because it got to the azara first yesterday. Aval lo shachtinu l'tarvayu. But if you haven't shachted them both, so then tiboilach. Then you have a question, right? Whether in that circumstance you haven't started, and so therefore maybe what happens is the chatos and the osham might still be first before the before the shlomim from yesterday, maybe what we're saying here is, once you've now slaughtered your shlomim, go ahead and finish the shlomim, right? Not the right thing. If you hadn't started it, you'd do your chatos nashim for sure first. But now that you've started it, i.e. you've messed it up, and now you've started it, now you got to take care of it because it came from yesterday. Okay, so that makes us draw the exact opposite conclusion. According to this, now we're going to finish the old korban first, and then we're going to go back and do the new one. Whereas before we had suggested that no, we weren't going to do that. So we don't have a proof. We tried to enlist our Mishnah both ways. We don't really prove from our Mishnah because we're not really sure. The bottom line is we're not really sure if the circumstance is that we've already shechted the shlamim, and that's what this is telling me. That despite already shechting the shlamim, I interrupted and do the chatos nashim, or I have not yet shechted the shlamim, and that's the circumstance where the chatos and the yashim go first. Okay, so now we're going to try to find a proof. Tashma. So we learned that when it came to Shabbos, we're making kiddush, and you've got wine. So we said davar acher. Another reason why there's an argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel about whether the wine comes first or the kiddush day comes first. Birchas hayayin tadira. Beis Hillel says the wine comes first. Why? Ubirkas hayom ina tadira, because birkas hayayin tadira, because the wine is tadir, more common, and birkas hayom ina tadira, and the Shabbos day is not. V'tadir v'shina tadir kodem, and Shabbos, and you go with the tadir first. So therefore, what does that show you? So that shows you the Shabbos obligation to make kiddush came before you poured the cup of wine. Therefore, it's similar to the circumstance where you had the non-tadir already there, and nevertheless, we tell you interrupt the Shabbos, pour out your wine. Now that you pour out your wine, you do the tadir. You interrupted your Shabbos to go back and do the tadir first, and then go back to Shabbos, right? So that's how they're going to try to look at this, right? If you've engaged with Shabbos, you still have to interrupt it and do the tadir first anyway. That's how they look at it. Now, hachanami, the answer is no. Hachanami keven de osyan keman de shchiti tarvayu dami. The answer is no, because now that the wine is on the table and you pour the cup of wine, now it's like the case where you shechted the shlamim. You have both of them right here again, right? You're right. Once you had the Shabbos, but that's not our case. You poured the cup of wine, so now you've got both of them. So therefore, in that circumstance, of course, the tadir comes first. You've got them both lying there. It's not similar to our case. Toshma, come and listen. We'll try again. Damar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says halacha. The halacha is mispal adam shel mincha v'yachar kaf shel musafim. You've got to do mincha and then musaf. Why? Musaf was already an obligation from this morning. So therefore, what do you see? You interrupt your obligation to take care of mincha because it's tadir. So you interrupt. So the answer is hachanami. No, that's not the same thing. Keven demati tfilas mincha. Once the time for mincha arrives, keman deshchiti tarvayu dami. It's like you have both korbanos slaughtered already, and now it's just a question of choosing which one you're going to do. So therefore, again, doesn't prove to us that you interrupt your code, right? The way that interrupting looked, just to remember, the way that interrupting looked is, I had my one korban, I stop in the middle and shecht the other one, bringing the obligation in. That's not what's happening here with this musaf and mincha, right? I had the musaf, but then mincha appeared on the scene, already at the right time. So therefore, I've got to take care of my mincha first. Amar le Rav Acha brei de Rav Ashi. So Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ashi, says, Ravina says to Ravina, Shchato kodem chatzos. Let's say you shecht your korban Pesach. You're supposed to shecht it afternoon. After chatzos, you do it in the afternoon because the pasuk says it has to be in the afternoon. Pasul. It's invalid. Can't shecht korban Pesach before noon. Mipnei shenemar, because the pasuk says bein harbayim. It's got to be done in the afternoon, right? The whole pasuk is shechtu also kol kala das Yisrael bein harbayim. Now, kodem l'tamid, you're also supposed to do the afternoon tamid first. They move the afternoon tamid earlier. Normally it's done later on in the day, but they moved it earlier in the afternoon, as early as possible, to give you maximum amount of time to do all the korban pesachs that have to be done. So let's say, though, you'd shechted the korban pesach at the right time, but not before the tamid, kosher. That's okay. That one's kosher, right? V'he memoris bedamo ad sheyizrak hadam. And what do? then even though you've shechted the Korban Pesach, you stop, you interrupt, you bring the Korban Tamid, you have somebody mixing the blood of the Pesach, bring the Korban Tamid, and then after the Tamid's done, then you go and continue and throw the blood of the Pesach. So therefore...
What's the big deal if it comes before the Tamid?
Because, what does the Pasuk say?
So we're looking at this case of
Shobin Arbayim with the Pasuk, because the Pasuk says Ba'erev. The Pasuk says Ba'erev. The Pesach has to be Ba'erev, meaning later on in the afternoon than the Korban Tamid, right? It's in the afternoon, but Ba'erev, closer to the evening than any other Korban. Right? By the Tamid, it doesn't say, it only says Bein Arbayim, it doesn't say Ba'erev. So Bein Arbayim, that's not Ba'erev, comes before Bein Arbayim, which is Ba'erev. That was in this Masechta, in Daf Yud Beis, he says, close to the bottom. So if you recall, that was 3 months ago, but if you remember. Okay. So, the answer is no. This doesn't prove again. This would have to be a circumstance where you already shechted the tamid. Now we've got both bloods here ready to go. Since we have both bloods, then we're going to take care of the tadir one first. Okay, that's the circumstance. But in Achinami, if you hadn't shechted the tamid, we would have thrown the Korban Pesach and then come back and done the tamid. We wouldn't have stopped in the middle, maybe. Okay. So Amar le Rav Acha Saba le Rav Ashi Masnisin Nami Daika. You can even say that that's the case from the Mishnah, because it says Diktani Ad Sheyizorek Hadam V'Loktani Sheyishchuk V'Yizorek Hadam. It says when you have this Korban Pesach, so you tell somebody hold on to the blood and stir it until the other person throws the blood of the tamid. Well, if it wasn't shechted, then you should be telling him to stir it until we slaughter the tamid and then throw its blood. Well, the reason that you're not telling him is to wait till we slaughter it and throw its blood because it's already been slaughtered. Therefore, you're just waiting to throw the blood. Okay. Now, the Mishnah said, the Kula and Kohanim Rishoyin, the Kohanim can eat this any way that they'd like. Right? So, my taima, why are the Kohanim allowed to eat it any way that you like? Aren't the Kohanim supposed to be doing everything l'shem shemayim for the sake of a mitzvah? Why are they supposed to make their barbecue sauce on the korbanos? Why? So the answer is Amar Kro. The pasuk says limashcha. Right? This is all of the kochim of Bnei Yisrael are given limashcha from the word of mishicha, which means to anoint, which means ligdula. It's supposed to be greatness. It's a hiddur mitzvah. It's supposed to be eaten deliciously. Kederech sham malachim ochlin. You're supposed to eat it in the way that kings would eat it, right? So eat it really nice. Okay, next Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says, "Ibra isa shemen shu mischalik bazara." You know, if you're in the Beis Hamikdash area, if you're in the Azara, and you see Kohanim are distributing some olive oil, so then ein tzarich lishol mahu. You don't really have to ask what it's for. There's only a couple of possibilities. There really shouldn't be a lot of extra oil handed around for the Kohanim. Right? Ella, what are our choices? Mosa Rekike Menachos, Yisrael. It could be the leftover oil that is brought when the Bnei Yisrael bring a Korban Mincha, and those things are fried up as wafers. So you're supposed to apply some of the oil that is brought together with them to the top of the wafers. There's more oil than you need. All the oil that's left over is distributed to the Kohanim. So that's one possibility what that oil is. The other possibility is Lug Shemen Shel Metzora, which we've talked about a lot. The person who has tzaras has to bring a Korban Asham. Together with this Korban Asham, he's going to have a log of oil, a big jug of oil, a container of oil, and he's going to apply the blood and the oil to his ear, to his thumb, to his toe. There's going to be leftovers. That leftovers gets distributed to the Kohen. Okay, so that's your two choices. If you see oil that's going to be poured on the mizbeach on the fire, you don't have to worry about what that is either. There's only a couple of choices there too. Ella mosa rikike minchas kohanim. It's the leftover. If a kohen brings a korban mincha, it doesn't get consumed by kohanim. It gets burned on the mizbeach. So therefore, if you've got this extra oil from these wafers, right, that was already applied, where does the extra oil go? It goes onto the mizbeach and gets burned. That's one possibility. Uminchas kohen mashiach, and also it could be the korban mincha of the kohen gadol, right? He's got an offering to bring. He's got some oil. That oil is also burned on the mizbeach, right? It's not distributed. Now, what's the point of making these statements, telling us what the oil is, what the oil could be? The answer is because he's telling you there's one thing it cannot be, and that is shein misnadvin shemen. It's not anybody's personal offering. That for sure you can't. Why? Because nobody's allowed to donate, simply walk into the base of mikdash and say, "Hi, I've got oil. It's for a korban." You can do that with wine, right? We'll see, right? If you walk in with a bottle of wine, you can say, "This wine is, I want this to be an offering," and they'll offer it, right? You can, even though oil is part of a korban, it's not its own korban by itself, according to Rabbi Shimon. You cannot just walk in. So therefore, if you see, if it was, how would it be treated? It would be a mincha, basically. So you'd have a kohen, theoretically, would come in, take a kmitza, even though it's liquid, right? The kmitza would get burned, and then you'd have the leftover oil distributed. Since that's not the case, you don't have a kmitza of the oil being burned on the fire. You don't have any oil being distributed amongst kohanim. So therefore, that's where Shimon's point is. I'll tell you what it's not. It's not that, because that doesn't exist. Rabbi Tarfon disagrees with him. Rabbi Tarfon Omer misnadvin shemen. You can make a donation of oil, so it certainly could happen. Says the Gemara. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says l'divrei Rabbi Tarfon. According to Rabbi Tarfon, hamisnadev shemen. According to Rabbi Tarfon, says you can do this, right? Somebody walks in and says, "I want to bring oil," right? Somebody who donates oil, kumso v'shirav ne'cholin. So he says what you do is you take a kmitza, and then the leftovers are consumed by the kohen, right? It's like any other korban mincha. My taima, what's the reason why you would presume that? Remember that the Torah never says anything about an oil offering. Where are we deriving that from? Amar Kro, the pasuk says korban mincha. This is the rule by a korban mincha. Milamed shemisnadvin shemen. That tells us that you're allowed to donate oil. Right, because the pasuk says, could have said v'nefesh ki sakriv mincha, a person who brings a mincha, right? And then the Torah adds on korban mincha, right? When a person brings a korban mincha, why adding an extra word? And why are we adding the extra word? We're adding the extra word to tell me that you can even bring a korban mincha from oil, right? Something else that you didn't know that you could bring it from. Oil is what you can bring it from. Now, since the source is mincha, v'chi mincha. The mincha oil, this gift of oil has to be brought like any other mincha. Ma mincha kumtza, you take a kmitza from it, v'shireha nechalin, and then the rest of it gets given to the kohanim, they can consume it. Av shemen kumtza v'shirav nechalin. So too, that's how oil is brought, right? So that's how it's done. You do kmitza, by every mincha, right? You take a kmitza and the rest is given to the kohanim. That's how the oil is done too. Take a kmitza, the rest is given to the kohanim.
It's just going to drip down.
It will. So imagine how you do your kmitza. There's not much you're going to be able to hold in your fist, but a few drops, right? It's going to be dropping. Amr Rabbi Zera says, Af anan nami tanina. We also know that this is the case, right, in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, Amr Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says, Im rois shemen shemischalik bazar. If you see oil being distributed in the courtyard, you don't have to wonder what it is. It's only either that leftover oil from the wafers or it is oil from the person who has tsaras. Why? She'ein misnadvin, because you can't make an adava, right? You can't make a gift of oil. Miklal, why is he pointing that out? Demand Damar misnadvin, because according to Rabbi Tarfon, who says you can make a donation, mischalik, you would see that being distributed in the Beis HaMikdash. That's distributed in the Beis HaMikdash. You would see that because that's what's done with it. Amar le Abaye. Abaye says, no, wait a second. Ema Seifa, the end says, Im rois shemen shenitan agabe ishim. Right? If you see oil that's being burnt on the fire, so then you don't have to ask what that is. It's leftover of the wafers from a Kohen's offering or from the Kohen Golo's offering. Why? Shein misnadvin shemen, because we don't make a donation of oil. Miklal dilman damar misnadvin, which would mean that according to Rabbi Tarfon, who says we do make a donation of oil, kulan lishim, it would get poured on the fire, right? So Labaye kasheresha. So Abaye, right? He said, according to Abaye, who seems to imply that the oil is going to be completely burned. How's he going to explain the first part of the Mishnah? That what is Rabbi Shimon saying? What's his point of bringing this? The fact that there's only two choices that it could be distributed. And Rabbi Zera kasher seifa. Rabbi Zera Okay, if it's being distributed in the amongst the Kohanim, so what's being poured on the fire? What's Rabbi Shimon's point about being poured on the fire? So Bishlam Rabbi Zera, it's not a problem for Rabbi Zera because Reisha b'Shirayim v'Seifa b'Kometz. If it's a donation offering, it's a mincha like Rabbi Zera, then there's a kmitza. The kmitza is burned on the fire. The rest of the oil is distributed. That's what Rabbi Shimon is saying. If you will never see other types of oil being burned on the fire because there's no kmitza of a nedava. And you will never see it being distributed because there's no distribution there's no nedava of oil. So therefore, those are not options. Okay, so that makes good sense. El Abaye kasha, but Abaye, it's a big question. Why is it there's no according to Abaye if you brought oil, you'd pour the entire thing on the fire. You wouldn't. What do you call it? You wouldn't. Sorry, 1 second. Got dizzy. Okay. I'm trying to. No, I'm just trying to. I'm good. Okay. So the answer is because according to Abaye, it's a question because according to Abaye, the entire thing's burned on the fire. What? Even if you hold that you do bring this korban shemen of nedava, so then you wouldn't witness it being distributed amongst the Kohanim anyway, because you don't distribute that. So the answer is Tana Reisha to Seifa. Shimon was only saying that. Rabbi Shimon was only saying that because he was going to say the end part, meaning it's going to be burnt. But I'll tell you what it's not, because there's no such thing as this. Okay, now that we mentioned that, we're also going to mention the fact that there's only what oil is being distributed in the base of English. It just parallels the two cases. That's all. Bishlama Seifa, I understand why the end is written because Tani Mishum Reisha, right? I don't understand. When you've got a Mishnah and you've got a phrase at the beginning of the Mishnah, it makes sense to tie off loose ends and write a parallel phrase at the end of the Mishnah. Ela Reisha Mishum Seifa Mitani. Would you write a Mishnah that you're going to write the beginning of the Mishnah because you're going to end off with something that doesn't make sense, that you would balance in that order? The answer is yeah, you do that. Right? If the Mishnah is going to end off with something, it makes sense for the other parallel, unnecessary case to be brought because it ties it up and makes it parallel. Amri bar Marav, they said in Eretz Yisrael, Tana Reisha Misum Seifa. That's exactly what was happening in our Mishnah. Right? The first part has only told us that you're not going to see this oil distributed in the Beis Hamikdash. Period. Then you're not going to see it on the fire. Why? Because that's the critical part that Rabbi Shimon was telling us, according to Abaye, that you don't burn. That there's no minchas nedava. There's no oil shemen that's in nedava. Okay.
I like that there's a saying.
Yes. Merav, and then Aaron says this. Yes, missions do that.
Yeah, we do that.
Yep.
There's a saying.
Yes, saying we do that.
You know that.
Okay. Toshma, come and listen. Yayin kediver Rabbi Akiva l'sfolim. Okay. Now, what if somebody walks in the base of English and says, "I'm donating a korban. My korban is wine." Right? What do you do with it? So Rabbi Akiva says we had a bowl on the corner. I don't know if our diagram really illustrates it fairly well. Might be small, might be blocked. It's not really here so well. No, it's not so great. Let's see if I have it.
With the book, it would be better than the book.
It would. I've got all the books. All right, books. Got the books. Okay, on the corner of the Mizbeach, we'll do it the old-fashioned way. Okay.
Back to the drawing board. Nice.
Right, back to the old drawing board, as they say. Okay. This is the corner of the Mizbeach. Okay, and it goes all down. Right, and then
Back to the 3D.
yes. Okay, this goes up this way, and then this goes down over here. Right. So here's our corner. Right. Okay. On the top of this southwest corner, they had a bowl. Right. This bowl had a pipe, and this is inside go down all the way below, right? That's where you're going to pour your wine, okay? It actually had two holes, right? It had two holes. One was for the water that you would pour on sukkahs, and one was for the wine. The wine hole was larger than the water hole because we learned that they had to go down at the same time, right? They had to go down at the same speed, so you need a larger hole for the wine because it's thicker. Okay, so now you're bringing your wine. According to Rabbi Akiva, you pour it right into the pipes, right into the sfolim, into this bowl that it's going to go down into the mizbeach. Okay. The shemen, kediv Rabbi Tarfon, and oil, which according to Rabbi Tarfon you can bring. Leishim, that goes on the fire. right? That gets burnt right on the fire. Not like we said before that it's getting distributed. This, according to Abayi's opinion, it just gets burnt. My love, midayayin kulo lisfalim, shemen kulo leishim. Should we not deduce that just like with the wine, you're pouring the entire thing into the bowl, right? That means that what this Bryce is saying is, like we just presumed, that all of the oil is getting poured on the fire, and therefore Abayi is correct. So the answer is midi iriya. No, not necessarily. Ha kedisa, ha kedisa. Each one is its own individual thing. When it comes to the wine, all of it gets poured down. When it comes to the oil, there's a kmitza. Only the kmitza gets burned. The rest of it is distributed amongst the Kohanim. So it doesn't prove anything. Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, Kitanai. What happens to the oil is machlokas tanayim. It's a machlokas from before. Shemen lo yivchos milug. If I've got oil and I want to donate oil, I can't donate less than a lug of oil because that's our minimum amount. You take a look back there and all the oil that's being brought for the karbonos, the minimum amount is a lug. You got to bring a lug. Rabbi Omer shloshes lugin. Rabbi says it's got to be 3 lugin. Well, now what's the issue here? The Ma'akamiflik, what's the point of their argument? Why does one say 1 lug, one says 3 lug? Amru Rabbanan kami Rav Papa. So the Rabbanan said before Rav Papa, Don mina mina, don mina va'oki ba'asra ki b'naihu. This is a argument that works like this. When I learn one thing from another thing, how far do I extend all of the things that I learn? If I say that this case, let's say I'm going to say this case is similar to this case. And we're going to see our example is going to be let's say our example is the korban mincha and the oil, right? You can bring, according to Rabbi Tarfon, you can bring oil. Why? Because it's like a mincha. So now, once I know that the oil is like a mincha, how far does that go? Does that mean that it is like a mincha in all regards? Or is it like a mincha, but there are obviously some clear distinctions and some things that are separate? That oil is still oil and flour is still flour, so not everything goes away all the way through. The Rabbanan Savri, the Rabbanan hold like this. Ma mincha, look, the source for oil is, that we can bring it, is from the korban mincha, which is flour. So ma mincha misnadvin, so just like you can donate flour, which we know is korban mincha, af shemen misnadvin. We learn from there that you can also donate oil. Now umina. Now we're going to take it one step further. Don't we know? We've learned from flour that you can bring oil. Now we're going to say that the oil has to be brought like flour. Ma mincha lug, just like the amount that you're going to bring by the flour is a lug. Shemen, a lug shemen, just like when you bring a flour offering, the amount of oil you bring is a lug. Afkan lug, so too the amount of oil you'd bring when you'd bring it by itself is also a lug shemen. Uma mincha kumtza v'shira necholin, and then we'll take it and continue on. Just like the mincha, you take a kmitza and you throw it on the fire and you eat the rest.
What is the oil? Is it like a pitcher of oil?
It's like a gallon, right? We had said before it was like the lug is around a gallon. We had presumed. I think that's what we said. So. Just like the korban mincha, you take a scoop, burn on the fire, the rest gets distributed. Af shemen kumtzo, also shemen, you take a scoop, v'shirav necholin, and the rest of it gets eaten. Now, the idach, the other side to this, that was what the Rabbanan say. The other side of this is mi mincha, right? We learn the lug of oil from mincha. Ma mincha misnadvin, just like the korban mincha is a donation, af shemen misnadvin, so we also can donate oil. V'oki ba'asra, however, oil and flour, that's where the similarity ends. Ken nisachim, you've got to say oil is more like wine, because it's liquid.
Expensive as well.
Ma nisachim shloshes lugin, just like when it comes to bringing wine, you have to bring 3 lug if you're bringing its own offering. So af shemen shalosh lugin. So too, the oil has to bring 3 lugin. Uman nesachim kulan lesfalim. Just like when it comes to the wine, all of it gets poured out. Af shemen kulan lishim. So to the oil, all of it gets burned. Okay. So therefore, that's a distinction. Amar le Rav Papa. Rav Papa says la Abaye. Mincha Maisi law, Rebbe, the Kuli, he says, Rav Papa says, according to Abaye, Rebbe and the Rebbe and the Rabbanan didn't argue with that at all. Okay, so where are we at? So,
I thought I started it before, sorry.
okay. So Rebbe's learning it from Ezra, right? So it's like wine. So therefore the oil korban is just like the wine. All of it is poured out on the fire, and you need 3 lug.
This is not related, but I noticed, completely as an aside, Rav Papa is always doing this.
Yeah, where he has with his Talmidim.
He always says, no, Kuli Alma, you thought it was Machlokas. No, Kuli Alma believes this.
Attention, I'm going to pay attention to it.
I have now picked up on it at least 4 times.
Oh.
He's done this.
Okay, good. Now everybody's going to pay attention. All the Rav Papa said this is Rav Papa's thing to do.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Amar le Rav Huna, braid de Rav Nosson Rav Papa. So Rav Huna, the son of Rav Nosson, says to Rav Papa, Mi matis amar hachi, can you really answer that though? V'atanya, we're in a brisa. Korban mincha, right? Pasuk says korban mincha, melamed shemisnadvin shemen. That's the source that you're supposed to be able to donate oil. V'kama, and how much? Shosha lugin, 3 lug. So that is self-contradictory, because according to Rav Papa, he said that if you learn the source is the korban mincha, then you have to hold that it's 1 lug. So this seems like it's a question of don mina umoki basra, that it's you learn some things from it, but not everything. Uman shmasl damar shlosh lugin. Who's the one who holds 3 lugin? That's Rebbe's opinion, not the Rabbanan's opinion. V'kamaisi lemi korban, and you see Rebbe is bringing it from korban, which you said is not his source. You said his source was Ezrach. Amar le itanya tanya. He says, look, if that's the brisa, that's the brisa. Okay, right? I tried. Doesn't work. All right, fine. So we'll have it the original way. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says, Hamisnadev yayin. If somebody is making a donation to the Beis Hamikdash, a korban of wine, maybe he brings it umizalfo al gabe ha'ishim. You actually sprinkle it onto the fire. Right? So this is in contrast to what we said before, that we're going to put it down the pipes. This is actually going to bring it on the fire. My taima, why would you say that? Amar Kol, the pasuk says, V'yayin takriv lenesach chatzi ahin. You're going to bring wine as a korban, as a libation, right? The liquid offering, half a hin. Isheh reach nichoach l'Hashem, burnt offering to Hashem. So therefore you pour the wine onto the fire. Problem is, he says, but you're putting. But then, if that's the case, you're putting out the fire in the mizbeach. And there's a pasuk, a losase. The pasuk says, "Eish tukad mizbeach lo sichbeh." You're supposed to, right? You're supposed to have a fire lit on the mizbeach. It cannot be put out. It is a losase if you put out the fire. So the answer is, kiboy b'mitzas lo shmei kiboy.
It's a big fire.
It's a big fire. You're not putting it out. Now, that, by the way, stands in contrast to Hilchos Shabbos, for example. On Hilchos Shabbos, you have a big fire and you turn it down, right? That's kiboy, right? Then that's putting out the fire, right? So therefore, but that's the chiddush here. That's not how it works, he suggests, by the mizbeach. Making the fire less isn't a problem. Ini, is that true?
Are you actually making it less because it's going to just be as big as it was a minute later?
Yeah, but at that moment you put it out. You did make it lower for a moment.
Okay.
Right? V'ha'amar Rav, is that true? Rav Nachman says Amar Rabbi Barvu and then Rabbi Vua. Hamorid gachelos me'al gabi mizbeach. Let's say if somebody takes a single coal off of the mizbeach, and he takes it down to the ground of a chiba and he puts it out. Chayiv, you have violated the prohibition of lo sichbeh. Don't put out the fire in the mizbeach. Now, that's only 1 coal. So you said that if you're not putting out the whole thing. So the answer is, deleka Elohai. The answer is that's the only coal. That was the last bit of the fire on the mizbeach, was the 1 coal, and you took it off. So the point that they're trying to make is, you don't have to have a big fire in order to violate it, but it has to be the last of the fire.
That's like if my kids, the Hanukkah menorah is 1 little ember left.
That's right.
You're trying to blow it out.
That's right.
Tell them not to do that.
There you go. Right? Don't put it. E-boys ema, or else I've got another answer that maybe kiboy b'miktas is also a problem, right? But here, kiboy de mitzvah shani, putting it out by doing a mitzvah is okay, right? Almost like a mitzvah that the Torah tells us, don't worry about putting out the fire. You've got a mitzvah of pouring this wine here. If it goes out, it goes out. I know I told you not to put it out, but this is a mitzvah, so that overrides. Toshma, come and listen. The Tano. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov klapi Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says, "Klapi shenosna Torah litrom yochol yichbeh v'yitrom." Since the Torah has told us that you're supposed to take a scoop from the Trumas Hadeshin, right? And you're supposed to take a scoop off, bring it down to the floor of the Azara, like we said, and put it on the ground over there. So you might think you're Yochel Yichbev Yitrom, that if the fire is burning really firmly, right, you could split it up, smash it down a little bit and scoop up some of the coals because it's a mitzvah to do it. So Amar, therefore the pasuk says, Lo Yichbeh, you're not allowed to put it out, even for the sake of Trumas Hadeshin, which is a mitzvah. Can't put it out. So the answer is no. Shani Hossam, that's different. Efshar de Yosef v'natar. There it's different because there you can just wait. Right? You don't have to put out the fire. So you're thinking, I'm eager to get Trumas Hadeshin started. Well, the answer is, if I can be Mekayim both of them, then be Mekayim both of them. Don't put it out. So if the fires are burning too bright, sit for a little bit. Eventually it'll go down. When it goes down, then do it. Can't worry about that when it comes to the wine. The wine you have to pour onto the fire. You're not going to be able to avoid it. So maybe that's why you could do it even though you're not allowed to put it out. Tashma, come and listen. Yayin k'divrei Rabbi Akiva. We said the wine, according to Rabbi Akiva, who says that you can bring wine as an offering. Let's follow him. It goes into the pipes, into the bowl. Shemen k'divrei Rabbi Tarfon liishim. The oil goes, like Rabbi Tarfon says, to the fire. So therefore, right? So the Brisa says that you're not supposed to, right? Put it. It's not like Shmuel says. Shmuel says you put it on the fire. It's not true, right? You're supposed to put it in the pipes. So therefore, there's a question on Shmuel, right? We said the last question is you couldn't be able to do it because it's going to put it out. Now we're saying here's a Brisa that says you can't do it. So the Od, and furthermore, Od Tanya, another Brisa says, Yayin Nesach, the oil that comes as a Nesach offering, l'sfalim, goes to the pipes. Oein elishim, or maybe it goes to the fire. Amart, so now it says, Lo yichbeh, you're not allowed to put it out. So therefore it has to go to the pipes. Okay, so lo kasha. That's not a contradiction. Ha Rabbi Yehuda, ha Rabbi Shimon. This is the old argument, which we haven't seen because we haven't been doing Masech Shabbos, between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon argue in a case called a davar she'eno miskavein. In Malachos of Shabbos, right? You have to, in order to violate Malach of Shabbos, you have to intend the consequence of the Malach that you're trying to do. What if, right, you accidentally do the Malacha, right? That's not your major intent. Okay? Let's say like this. I open my refrigerator door, and I'm looking around, and trips the thing, and now the motor turns on, right? I didn't intend to do that, but it got caused indirectly by the thing that I was doing, right? So it's a dover shino miskaving. So here, my intention is not to put out the fire. My intention is to burn the wine. It's a davar she'eno miskavein if I put out the fire. So therefore, that's the argument. According to Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that a davar she'eno miskavein says that it is usser, prohibited anyway. You can't do it, so you got to pour it into the pipes. According to Rabbi Shimon, who says davar she'eno miskavein is mutter, so the fire is okay. Now we have something called a psik resha. Psik resha is when the consequence is inevitable. I open my refrigerator door and the light turns on, right? That isn't my intent to turn the light on, but it's inevitable. That's usher, according to everybody. Why? Then it's not inevitable, right? Then it's not inevitable. So if it's inevitable, then it becomes usher. Rashi wants to know, if I'm pouring wine on the fire, why isn't it a psik resha? Why isn't it inevitable that you're going to put out the fire?
Wine is alcohol, right? Alcohol.
Yeah, but nevertheless, it's not strong enough that it's going to catch fire, right? If you've ever tried it, you get home tonight, Havdalah, exactly. That's exactly right. Right? It's not going to catch fire. So, what do you call it? So then he says it's not a psik resha. Why? Because when you pour the wine, you don't glug like this. You take it and you sprinkle it in light amounts. That light amount is not necessarily. The fire is going to heat it up faster, and it's just going to boil away it's not going to put out the fire necessarily. Therefore, yes, it could be that a larger drop will drop on the fire, but that's not definite. That's not guaranteed. Okay. Now, the Hamar Shmuel. 1 second though. Shmuel. So we're suggesting. So Shmuel is suggesting that it's a machlokes whether you pour it in the pipes or you pour it on the fire, depending on if you hold like Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Shimon, right? So therefore, Shmuel is holding that it's permissible to put out the fire. He holds like Rabbi Shimon. Problem is, can Shmuel hold like Rabbi Shimon? Because we have another machlokes, famous machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, and it goes like this: If I have a boiling red hot piece of metal in a public area on Shabbos, right? If I put out that red hot fire, red hot thing, it's going to be mechabed, it's prohibition on Shabbos.
But a hot plate can get red hot.
And you can't turn it off on Shabbos.
How do you put something on it? If it's cold.
No, I said you can't turn it off on Shabbos, right? There's no problem of it being there. You can't turn it off. But if I have a dangerous item like this in the public area, so then I can get rid of it. I can pour water on it, cool it off, and put it out. Right? Why? We don't want anybody to get hurt by it. So that's important to note. Now, why is that? Because that red hot burning piece of metal is really not burning, right? It's just a red hot piece of metal. Only in Isser D'Rabbanan, it's only rabbinically problematic to cool it off. But if you had a piece of wood that was on fire, that's the D'Oraisa prohibition of Mechabe, of putting out the fire. Now, that's what Shmuel says. Now, if he holds like Rabbi Shimon, it would still be permitted to put out the fire on the wood. Why? I'm sorry, because why? Because it's called a malacha she'ena tzricha legufa. When is it prohibited to put out a fire? Why is putting out a fire a problem? Because putting out a fire on Shabbos is the constructive creation of a coal. What are coals?
Even if something catches fire at home, you're not allowed to put it out.
Yes, but that's a different way to say that. That's a different story. We'll wait until Masechah Shabbos talk about putting your house on fire and putting that out, right? But here, if I have a piece of wood that's on fire and I want to preserve, right? That's we read that in every here we daven in Nusach Sfard, so we don't say Ezem Mekomon. But if you daven Nusach Ashkenaz and you say the second parak of before Kabbalah Shabbos, second parak of Mishnayos of Masechah Shabbos, one of the cases is if you put out the coal because you're trying to conserve the oil, conserve the coal, that's an Isser D'Oraisa, right? So therefore, this circumstance, you're not trying to conserve the wood and make a coal. You're just trying to save somebody's life. So therefore, why is it a problem? According to Rabbi Shimon, according to Rabbi Shimon, it's not a problem. It's a malacha she'ena tzricha legufa. We call that malacha that you don't need it for its purpose. So there, you're right. Putting out as a malacha, but it's not the malacha as it was done in the Beis Hamikdash. Is how we generally translate it. Rashi doesn't say that, by the way. Rashi. Normally we call it malacha she'en tzricha legufa. If you're familiar with Hilchos Shabbos, right? The malacha she'en tzricha legufa is commonly explained as if I do a malacha not in the way it was done in the Beis Hamikdash. Rashi says it's a malacha that I would rather not be doing in the first place. If I had my choice, there would be no burning coal here at all. It's only now that it's here, I got to do something about it. Therefore, it's a malacha she'en tzricha legufa. I don't want to have to be dealing with this coal. Therefore, when I do the malacha, it's not malacha I want to be doing. So, how can, if Rabbi Shimon holds like Shmuel, so when it comes to Davar She'ena Miskavein, so then how come when it comes to Malacha She'en Tzricha Legufa, he's not saying it's permitted to put out the fire on the wood? So the answer is, but Malacha She'en Tzricha Legufa, so when it comes to Davar She'ena Miskavein, Savar Rabbi Shimon. When it comes to an unintentional malacha, the unintentional consequence malacha, that he holds like Rabbi Shimon. But Malacha She'en Tzricha Legufa, when it comes to Malacha She'en Tzricha Legufa, that's Savar like Rabbi Yehuda. That he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay? Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna says as follows: Nesachim shenitmeu. Right? If I've got wine that became tamei, oselahen maracha bifnei atzman v'sorfan. You've got to make your own fire. You got to make a fire and you got to burn it. Can't burn it in the same place you burn all the other ruined korbanos, because it's a liquid, Rashi says, and it won't be nicker, won't be recognizable that what it is that you're doing. So you're going to build its own fire, you're going to burn this liquid. Mishum shenemer, why? Because the pasuk says, Ba'kodesh ba'esh tisaref. If it becomes tummy, you burn it in the kodesh, so you make a fire there and you burn it. Tanya nami yochli, we have a brisa that supports that. Hadam ve'ashemen, when it comes to blood and oil, ve'hamenachos, and the flour, ve'hanesachim, and the wine, shenitmeu, that they became tamei. Osa mehen ma'aracha, you make a bonfire on them, bifnei atzmim, for themselves, visorfon, and you burn them. Amar le Shmuel le Rav Chana Bagdata. So Shmuel said to Rav Chana from Baghdad, Aisi li beyasara ve'emalach kamayhu. If you can gather 10 people together for me, that's a great halacha. I would like to make a public announcement of that halacha. Nesachim shenitmeu, if you have nesachim, if you have the wine that became tamei, also lehem marach b'fnei atzman v'sorfan, you have to make a bonfire on itself and you burn that. Okay.
But what would you need a minion to make the announcement?
Why? Because that's how you publicize something, right? This is when you want to make something public, you tell it to 10 people. Then it's going to get around, right? So the Chasidei David wants to know, why is Shmuel so interested in this halacha? Right? This is such a big deal that he wants to be able to publicize this one, right? He has to go tell everybody about it. And we also have to bring the Maisa, we have to be able to bring the story about how he did it. So he explains that Shmuel knew that this brisa is not accepted by. In other words, not everybody is agreeing to it. So therefore, this rule, some held that this rule is by the wine, not by everything else that he was listing there. So therefore, he went in order to publicize this in front of 10 people, in order so that everybody will know that this brisa is not accurate. It's only the wine, right? That was his point. He says, there's this brisa that says everything is burnt. He says just the wine. He says, I want to be able to make sure that everybody understands it. Now that there's a brisa floating around that's going to give people misconceptions. Okay, so that's how he ends. Hadron alach kol hatadir, hadron alach kol hatadir, hadron alach kol hatadir, and should we do the Mishnah? Well, let's yeah. Okay.
We got 5 minutes.
Let's do it. Let's do a Mishnah. Dam chatos shenitas al beged. This parak talks all about our halacha that we had sort of mentioned in side passing and before. That if I have blood from a korban chatos, if it gets onto the garment of the Kohen, it needs to be washed off. Cannot be just ignored, right? That's a special rule by korban chatos, not by any other korbanos. Even Rabbi Elazar, who says kachatos ka'asham, that he says asham and chatos have the same rules. He doesn't say that here. This is only a specific rule by a chatos. So if blood from the chatos splashes onto the garment, hareza ton kibus, it needs to be washed. Even though the pasuk that tells us that it needs to be washed is talking about korbanos that are consumed, which means the outer chatas offerings, not the inner chatas offerings. And so this is the rule, is that all the blood, even if it's of the inner chatas offerings, also this rule applies to. Shenemar, because the pasuk says, "B'makom kadosh te'achel," it should be consumed and eaten in a holy place, in the Azara. Echad hanecholos ve'echad pnimios tunos kibus. Nevertheless, the halacha is that whether the blood is applied inside or outside of the Beis Hamikdash, inside on the outer mizbeach or the inner mizbeach, you have to wash off that blood. Shenemar, why? Because the Torah says Torah's chatos. The rule of the chatos is consistent. Torah achas lekol chatos. Therefore, all chatos are like that. We're going to see that when it says all, it doesn't mean all. But means most. Chatos psula, if I have a chatos which is now puzzle, right? It has something wrong with it, and the blood is no longer kosher. Ein dama ton kibus. Then I don't have to worry about kibus. It's puzzle korban. Bein sha'isol shasa kosher, bein shalo shasa kosher. It does not matter if at one point the blood was fine and it became puzzle, or it was never kosher, right? It's nevertheless. It's now it's tum, as long as it's now it's not kosher, doesn't need kibus. Ezo hishahaisol shasa kosher. What's an example of one that had a time that it was kosher? Shelana, right? Let's say, for example, I've got blood and they left it. They didn't sprinkle it today. Now tomorrow comes and they have blood to sprinkle. That blood doesn't need kibus anymore because it's already left overnight. It's already tummy. It's not tummy. It's already puzzle. Also, it could have become tummy. At one point, it was perfectly fine. Now it's tummy. It doesn't need kibus. Or it was perfectly fine, but it went out of the azara. Nevertheless, it is now doesn't need kibus. What's an example of one that was never valid at all? You did shchita and you had pickle intentions, right? Outside the right time or outside the right place, ruined immediately. Or somebody who was a non-kosher kohen, not a kosher kohen, caught the blood, also invalidates the blood immediately. Says the Gemara, dam chatos. So pasuk says, blood of a chatos. Ve'i Torah achas lekol chatos. Now, if you're telling me that this is the rule by all the blood of all the chatos, afilu chatos of nami, then this would mean that even blood from a chatos bird would also need washing. Allah Tanya, why do we have a brisa that says not like that? I might think that the bird blood from a korban chatos also needs to be washed. Tamalomar, zos, it says zos, only this blood, not all blood. Reish Lakish, Mishum Bar Kapara Markra. So Reish Lakish says the name of Bar Kapara. The pasuk says Tishachet. That the pasuk, when it's talking about the washing of the blood, it says it shall be slaughtered. Therefore, it's only telling me that this rule applies to animal offerings which are slaughtered, not those that have malika done, like birds. Why don't we just say it's only the ones that are consumed, right? Not just the ones that are shechted, but it also says in the pasuk, as the pasuk says, this rule of washing should only apply to the outer offerings that are eaten, about panemius low, not the inner ones. So Rabbi Rahmana Torahs, right? The Torah says the word the Torah says the word Torahs to tell me we're including something else. So you're including all the chatos. If that's true, afilu chatos of nami. Well, if you're including all the chatos, then you should be including the bird one. So therefore, the answer is miat rachmana zos. The Torah says zos means not all of them. So basically, Torah tells me to include something, and zos tells me to exclude something. So therefore, we included the inner korbanos and we excluded the bird korbanos. So the question is, Umar Isa, why did you decide to include the inner korbanos and not the bird one? So it makes more sense to include the animal ones that are on the inside. Shekain behema, because it's an animal. Behema, it's got several things that are similar. Shchitas tafud, it's slaughtered in the north. The kabbalas kli, you catch the blood in a utensil. The keren, and you apply the blood on the corner of the mizbeach. The etzba with your finger. The chuda on the exact corner. The ishim, and it's burned. Yeah, but adra b'chatas of havalei lasuye l'rabuye. But a bird also has similarities. Let's include that. Shekain chutz kamosa, because it's brought outside of the Beis Hamikdash, right? So that's very similar, right? V'achila kamosa, you also eat it. You don't eat the korbanos that are brought on the inside. So the answer is hanach nefishin. There's more similarities with the inner korbanos than the outer korbanos. We have like 6 of them. 6 against 2 or 3. That's which one outweighs. We're going to have 2 more ways of understanding this. We'll pick that up on Sunday morning.
Beautiful. On the Zoom, back on the internet. So for a day. Go